Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss Rishi Sunak's press conference yesterday in which he promised emergency legislation to deal with the Supreme Court ruling and continue with the Rwanda plan. In short, what he's proposing can't really work. It's just a way of keeping the far right quiet. But will it work? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I discussed the main feature of the Supreme Court ruling yesterday, so check out that video if you need some further background to this one. But the bottom line is that the Supreme Court ruled against the plan because Rwanda is not safe. Now, after the ruling, Boris Johnson said that if he were Prime Minister, he would deal with this really easily. He would just declare Rwanda safe and that would deal with the court ruling. Being clear, no, it wouldn't. The Supreme Court did not cite UK government designations in their ruling. They didn't say, oh, it's because the UK government doesn't say Rwanda's safe, so it's not safe. In fact, the UK government under Boris Johnson did declare Rwanda safe. The Supreme Court cited actual evidence of refoulement on the part of the Rwandan government, not what UK ministers were saying about the country. What Johnson was doing was trying to claim that there was a simple executive solution to this that Sunak didn't want to pursue. So naturally, Rishi Sunak announced in his press conference that he would be doing just that, just to take the wind out of Boris Johnson's sails. Because from Johnson's point of view, he wants to make it sound like there's a really easy solution because he wants to undermine Sunak for not achieving it. From Sunak's point of view, he just wants his government to be stable. Not to govern, of course, he's not doing any of that, but to make as much money for himself and his wife as he can. They're often described as billionaires, you see. So wealthy are they? But they're not actually billionaires. They'd like to be, though. It's very likely that Sunak is focusing his efforts on the Indian trade deal. If he can get that sewn up in time for the election, that will make his father-in-law and his wife an absolute mint. At great cost to the UK, of course. But the negotiations are not particularly advanced. He needs more time, possibly a lot more time. He may actually need more time than he's got, but he needs to give himself as much time as he can. So he needs to keep his party together long enough to lay his nest egg. That's how I would view all of Sunak's behaviours, through the prism of wanting more time to feather his nest before jetting off to California. Rishi Sunak's press conference and immediate aftermath was a complete nonsense from a policy announcement point of view. He said he would get Parliament to declare Rwanda safe. That does not address the issue. The Supreme Court didn't rule against the plan because Rwanda is not deemed safe for refugees, but because it isn't safe. He said that he wouldn't allow a foreign court to block him, but no foreign court is doing so, nor threatens to do so. Like the European Court of Human Rights, for example, that's not a foreign court, because we're part of it, and a British judge sits on it. But that little bit of semantics is a waste of time anyway, because the court in question is the UK Supreme Court. 100% of the justices are British, and it sits in London, not very far from when Rishi Sunak was presenting his word salad to the nation yesterday. The Conservatives posted a graphic last night talking about we're going to get the Rwandan returns going. Leanderthal talked about sending them back to Rwanda. It's like, what do either of those things even mean? I mean, I don't know if we have any asylum seekers from Rwanda, but it won't be that many. They're not trying to return anyone to Rwanda. The fact that the statements from Sunak make no sense is all the evidence you really need to realise that it's just performative. But for whom? Partially members of the public who support the Rwanda plan, perhaps, but mostly his own MPs. Like I say, I don't believe Sunak really cares about the election result, which would mean he's not that bothered about public opinion, except, of course, that it does make it easier for him to calm his MPs down if public opinion is supportive of the Prime Minister. But let's look at this in simple terms. Rishi Sunak is attempting to do one of three things with this so-called emergency action. First, address the concerns of the Supreme Court in order to have the new plan declared lawful. Well, his proposals wouldn't do that. And let's say they did. There would still be legal challenges which would use up the rest of the parliamentary time. So it doesn't seem credible that this plan could even hypothetically lead to Rwanda flights before the election. Second, Sunak could be aiming to simply ignore the court rulings. Now, there was a hint of this in his speech, although it has to be said the new Home Secretary James cleverly suggested that he's not interested in any of that. It's not clear how ignoring the court rulings would work in practice. I mean, I get how a Tory criminal cabal might be happy ignoring the courts, but I don't think Home Office officials or police or pilots, all of the people involved in rounding up refugees and sending them to Rwanda, I don't think any of those would ignore the courts. I don't think they want to risk prosecution. And I don't think Sunak is proposing that Lee Anderson be trained as a pilot either. So I'm not sure that that plan is credible. Third, Sunak could be aiming at passing legislation. He says he wants to pass emergency legislation, which effectively suspends either the authority of the courts over government actions or suspends human rights laws where government actions are concerned. In other words, sets the government above the law. Now, legislation like that would be fairly meaty, I imagine, and it would need to pass through Parliament. It would be a new low if Tory MPs supported that legislation in large enough numbers to get it through the House of Commons, because the opposition would be against it. But surely the House of Lords would not support it. And because we're into the final session of this Parliament, there's no way the government could force it through. They can't use the Parliament Act to ram it through. Because there's not enough time before the election. Alex Wickham of Bloomberg was citing a former Home Office official as saying there was less than a 10% chance of a pre-election Rwandan flight. I'm not even sure where they get the 10% from. I've heard no legal experts suggest even an unlikely way through this for the Tories. As I see it, this is purely Sunak trying to keep the far right from open rebellion. He's banking on the fact that enough of them are thick enough to approve of his rhetoric and give him time to go through with it, because they think to themselves, well, he's saying he's going to do exactly what I would do, so I'll give him time. The new Conservatives, those who are aligned with Suella Braverman that I discussed earlier this week, they're not impressed. They've said, no, we just think he's wasting time, which he is. They've said that they're organising confidence letters against Sunak. They understand that Sunak's so-called plan has no chance of working, and they are now agitating for the suspension of all human rights laws in the UK, like explicitly now. But they do not represent that many Tory MPs. Threats of letters from them will not lose Sunak a second of sleep. But there are more than enough Tory MPs supporting the Rwanda plan to worry Sunak if they decide that, one, he's not going to achieve their aims, and two, that there's something they can do to force his hand via sending letters in. And I'll tell you what is not necessarily unexpected, but is still remarkable. There's a faction of the Tory party with a ready platform available to them on the mainstream media who are actively now pushing for the UK to sever international agreements, all international agreements which have anything to do with human rights laws, which is basically all of them. And I mean all. Now, if we cut our international human rights obligations, consider this: almost all of our international trade agreements are null and void. Our international obligations often underpin these other treaties. The Good Friday Agreement is the most famous. It's based directly on the European Convention on Human Rights. So the Good Friday Agreement is completely shattered if we were to suspend it. But there's lots of trade agreements that just collapse if we do what Braverman and Rilke are proposing as well. It would make a no-deal Brexit look like a picnic. Our economy is already in a pretty frail state. There's already businesses saying they're having difficulty exporting. Imagine this. Imagine being told, oh yeah, next Thursday, you know those trade deals you don't think are good enough? Yeah, you haven't even got those. Imagine if the entire framework of our international trade agreements were to unravel overnight. The UK would be finished, utterly finished. Now, I don't know whether Braverman's brigade understand the implications, the full implications of their lunacy or not, whether they don't care. What I do know is that it is a complete non-starter. Like, imagine a UK government were even to propose such action seriously. They actually laid a bill before the House, so it was actually going to happen. The rest of the world would not sit by quietly and go, they're going to look silly in a few weeks. No, they would. The United States would do its not. There is no credible way to achieve what the new Conservative headbangers claim they want to achieve in the foreseeable future, especially while Northern Ireland remains part of the UK. America would never allow it. What I don't know is how many Tory MPs realise this and how many do not. Because I'll tell you what, there's none of them really saying anything. We cannot assume that they understand the reality of their proposals and, are just lying for personal gain. Because it's clear that even many of the Brexit leaders didn't actually understand what Brexit was. The same will apply here. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.